Good morning, everybody. I'm going to officially kick us off here. My name is Anne-Marie Santamarina from LincolnIT, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the last installation of the LincolnIT Sip and Secure series. We're so excited and really grateful that you spent your October Tuesdays and Thursdays with us over the last 3 weeks. It's been a lot of fun. For us and hopefully for you as well, and hopefully very informative. So we have with us today, rounding up the series, Ali Law Group. We have Sima with us. We're very excited to have Sima here today because we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of regulations and some of the legal aspects of the security components that we've been sharing with you over these last 3 weeks. With Sima, we have Lincoln's very own Ron Cuevas, who you might have caught a glimpse of during the CyberSafe panel discussion earlier this month. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ron and Sima. And again, thank you everybody for being here. We are recording, so I just want to put that disclaimer out and let you know, and just enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. Great, thanks, Anne-Marie. All right, Sima.
So yeah, just before we kick it off, and I so appreciate the opportunity to partner with.
Go ahead, Sima.
Yeah. Oh, am I back on mute? So hi, my name is Sima Ali, and I'm the principal attorney of Ali Law Group, and I'm very excited to participate with Lincoln in this webinar, and honored to be a guest. I love the concept of the Sip and Secure. Hopefully, people get to enjoy the end reward of the virtual wine tasting. Just a brief little bit about me and the firm. So I've been a labor and employment attorney for over 25 years, and we do basically labor and employment counseling for businesses. So we act as outside counsel, basically on an in-house, almost like an in-house capacity for businesses to help guide them through all facets of labor and employment law, which in this day and age are quite a number. And happy to say I've actually, part of the reason we've been able to partner with Lincoln is we've been working with them. They've been our client for a long time. So it's great to be able to do something together.
Thanks, Stephen. It's been a great relationship as well. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for the internet traffic. We're here. The team has been working really hard on this whole Sip and Secure. So before we start, I want to thank everybody that actually worked to put this together, especially Anne-Marie has done a great job in getting this series together. So we're thankful to be getting to the last one. We hope that everybody can enjoy a couple of bottles of Macari wine in a couple of weeks. So we'll get that all recognized and squared away here very shortly. But a little bit about Lincoln. We've been here since 1988 and over 22 plus years in business. We are about 125 employees, give or take, depending on the projects and the scope of where we're at. And we do have multiple strategic locations. We are Hicksville, Long Island, headquartered. We also have offices in East Hampton, New York City, and until recently we had Boca Raton. We took our Boca folks and they're just working from home instead of getting to a WeWork. For full disclosure, we also have a Philippines operations that is 100% Lincoln employees that do some work for us for specific projects and specific clients. As with any managed services organization, we work very hard on our accreditations, and we are a privately held firm. We have our own private data center with a second data center in Secaucus, New Jersey, primaries in Hicksville. We have all the accreditations to run that service for multiple regulatory requirements such as FINRA and others, HIPAA obviously. We're really proud to be part of the Elite 150 also from an MSP perspective. So that's just a glimpse into Lincoln, and if anybody has any questions around what we do and how we do it, I'd be more than happy to take that call and have that conversation with you. So Sima, I'm going to kick it off and move on to the next slide and we'll get going.
Great. You want me to just go over the overview of it? Okay. So, and I know I didn't participate in all the other ones, but the idea behind this webinar or this particular, information session is just to kind of guide you through the legal risks or what they are, especially presented in a remote work environment, which so many businesses have had to shift towards or, expand their remote working. And then how, based on those legal risks and how you evaluate them, what are some best practices so that you can avoid the risks or hopefully maintain a secure environment, and come up with strategies to do that, come up with some training mechanisms, and also starting to think about different plans. So in this, as we've been pushing more and more like work is actually happening on computers, on the cloud, you have to sort of embrace cybersecurity as part of your, overall practices, just the way you would think about, coming up with policies around, leaves and vacations. Cybersecurity is something you have to kind of think about as part of the way you structure your workplace going forward. Okay. So the first thing I think, we could just go to the next slide, is just the legal risks in general in terms of cybersecurity. And I think the basic way to think about it, and there's a whole host of laws around it, but it's appropriate to use the word security in this sense. So you think about, if you had like your office, or if it was a physical structure, you take steps to protect your assets and, or your things. There's locks, there's protections in place. So when you're thinking about, cyber and technology and security in that way, the main thing, or the biggest risks presented to employers or businesses, is the threat that your assets are going to be taken in some way. And a company's probably most, important asset is its proprietary information, or what is called a trade secret. And that's your special sauce. It's what makes your business unique. It's usually what is, the most valuable in your business. It's your customers. It's how you do your business. It's all your special information. It's the information your employees have or that they develop. And that's something you try to secure. Now, there's other things that you can do to keep it secure, but when everyone's working remotely, when you have a lot of different ways to access that information that aren't just in a controlled environment, that's where you have a greater risk or threat. And there's several laws that protect or provide, a right of action for you if somebody basically steals or misappropriates your trade secret. So a trade secret is something that's basically not known to the public and is really something unique to your organization. And it's financial data, it's your business data, it's any kind of formula, design, and the formula for Coke. That's the most common thing. So what does it mean to misappropriate? It means to actually take or steal, or acquire it by improper means, and without consent. And that's a big threat. The idea, I think, that we wanted, now there's recourse for people if someone misappropriates a trade secret and you suffer a harm. But what we want to be thinking about is, do we want to really wait till that happens, or do we want to eliminate the opportunity for someone to acquire that trade secret by an improper means? We can go to the next slide. Okay, so improper means at this point, it's theft or bribery, misrepresentation, any kind of breach of a contract, or through electronic means. So that's where I think this is where the cybersecurity issue comes in. So it's an actionable way to be able to get a recourse or remedy if you lose it. But once the cat is out of the bag and your secret is out, it's sometimes, no matter what you do, you don't really you don't really can never truly be made whole. So all of these statutes, whether there's the federal law, the state law, or even a common law theory, that if you do have a private right of action for misappropriation of a trade secret, so someone steals your trade secret, what a court will do is to say, well, what can we do to make you whole? Many times it's damages, or what they do is they say, okay, well, stop using that trade secret. But at that point, it's very hard to remedy the situation. So I think what the focus is, where is your vulnerability in your electronic thing to, your electronic systems that might lead to the loss of your trade secret. That's one tremendous threat. The remedies, like I said, are limited to the theories of making whole. So you can have an injunction, there's actual damages, sometimes it's, royalties, but it doesn't give you back the secret. Think like that just doesn't happen, because it can't happen. We can go. So there's also other things rooted in related to fraud and privacy that come up. So you have, you have, as a company, you have your information, like your trade secrets and your proprietary information, but also many businesses, depending on whatever sector you're in, or, how you're operating, you also have, private or personally identifiable information of your employees, as well as potentially of your customers, vendors, or things like that. So, and much of that information at this point is probably housed in some electronic format. So there are laws rooted in protecting that privacy, that information that's private, and also in making sure that there isn't an abuse of that information related to fraud. And there's several laws just around that concept, but most recently there was an amendment, and this law is called the New York Shield Act. And the goal behind this law was to, help improve electronic data security. There isn't a private right of action for somebody that's a New York resident to say my privacy rights were violated. But if you're not in compliance with the guidelines that the New York Shield Act puts out, which we can go over in the next slide, there are penalties that can be assessed against you in those gradations of 2,000 and 5,000. So what is personal information? Like I said, it's personally identifiable information. So a person's name, a number, an identifier, their social security number, credit card information, date of birth. Some people use like the biometric or fingerprints to, track time. That's also personally identifiable information. Many people have different usernames, passwords, all those things that they use over and over again, which everyone tells you not to do, but people do it anyway. So that's all personally identifiable information. So what this law says is that if you are a business or person that has computerized data, that has private information, which, like I said, many of us do because of, you have the employees' data, plus you have your customers' data. Your obligation is, under this law, is to develop, implement, and maintain reasonable safeguards to protect the security, confidentiality, and integrity of that information. It also includes disposal or destruction of that data, which there are other laws that require you to do that anyway, so that people don't get access to that, to that information. So the main thing, and I think it's important, I think when Ron goes over how hackers attack, and when we talk about it in the future, is coming up with those safeguards so that you can prevent these leaks and these attacks.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Appreciate it. So how hackers attack, obviously, going back into the information world, so one of the easier ways that they attack is through phishing emails. And as my friends at my cybersecurity partner always says, there's always bad actors out there that try to get into your organization the easiest way they can. And phishing emails is certainly one of them. So, again, taking a look at an email that you get that's not known, that you don't know the sender, be careful, right? Because obviously if you click on any links associated with that email, even the email itself, sometimes, you're letting people access into your network unintentionally, and that's just through malware and other means. So a little simple trick is just hover on the username and make sure that it actually comes from somebody that you know, right? And if it looks suspicious, act it as suspicious. So, or treat it as suspicious. So that was our general rule of thumb. So fake emails are also, another way in which issues come through, right? So, I have an 8-year-old son. He loves to go on all these different websites, and I tell him, don't go on my PC or even my phone. He tries to grab my iPhone and download all these games. Most probably, some of them are good, but at the end of the day, people are trying to get into your information. So stay away from applications that are, maybe you're not going to use as often as you really need to. And so try to keep them off of your business computer, your business phone. Use it on your personal infrastructure, and hopefully you'll protect your data as well. Impersonated phone calls, I know we're all getting them these days. It seems like there's been a huge uptick in the last 6 to 8 months of just phone calls coming through, whether it be Social Security scams, whether it be, I got 3 calls this morning that my insurance or my insurance and for my automobile, the warranty for my automobile is up and running, right? So is up. So, take measures on those. Understand the user ID, the caller ID that is actually coming through. Don't trust the caller ID sometimes, because there are ways to get around that. If you want to really block a person, go onto the do not call list and obviously block it from your phones as well. Wi-Fi access. Everybody, we've pushed out to a remote infrastructure, right? And so a lot of folks are working from home, and they have their own personal Wi-Fi at home. And most probably, unless they really know, they're not using that in a secure manner. They don't have an SSID or secure infrastructure at home that is transmitting, from a PC to your FiOS or Altice or whatever you use at home for internet service. So businesses should be aware of how people are actually accessing the internet when they have to transmit business data, because it is open and it can be hacked. And, the last thing, it does happen, and hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody on this call or beyond, but, people do roam and try to get onto access points and try to get on. The biggest culprit in my mind is we get to an airport. You never know what you're actually getting into, right? So just be careful around those types of security, those Wi-Fi accesses, because again, they are a big vulnerability when people are transmitting business data. And for us, what we always say and preach is, have a good network security infrastructure. We're going to get into a little deeper around that here in a minute. But, your business data is now being accessed from multiple locations, whether it be from your smartphone, your laptop, your home PC, if you're allowing that. Again, be really careful for your employees and how they access and transmit data. The lack of network security it really allows bad actors to get into your network. It happens every day. You hear of the big organizations that get hacked, but from a managed services perspective, what we do, we see the smaller SMBs, the mid-market companies, the small companies that get access on a regular basis. I just had a client, a new client now, that called us because they had 8 PCs in their retail business get hacked, and we helped them through that situation. Unfortunately, that they didn't have any of the securities that they needed to have in that place, in place. So it was a really bad situation for them. Thankfully, we were able to help them out. And it's becoming tougher for people to actually pay ransoms. So if you think you're getting ransomware, that last line of defense is you'll pay the ransom. don't think of that anymore. The federal government is really cracking down on that and putting a lot of those organizations that actually act as the intermediaries out of business, because there is a lot of regulations that are going in place to make it illegal to pay those ransoms at this point in time. So prevention strategies for us is layered security. You know, it starts at the workstation, goes all the way through the network. Make sure you have multiple pieces of layered security in place. I mean by that is starting off with antivirus, malware. Make sure you have strong Wi-Fi access if you're working from home. Make sure your firewall has security services enabled in it. If you have to have data that's moved around and you're working on your laptop and need to save it to your laptop, make sure that laptop has an encryption service on it, right? Encrypt the hard drive. It's an easy thing to do, and it's a hard thing to break if your laptop is lost or stolen. And really think about, you know, at the end of the day, you know, do you really, depending on the business that you're in, do you need real-time threat protection, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that really is going to enable you to understand what's going on in a real-time manner. All the tools and services that you probably have in place, if you don't have real-time threat protection, they're where they're supposed to be proactive, more likely reactive. To be proactive, you really need to have that threat awareness going on every day. So, and that goes to an audit as well. Make sure you have a third-party independent audit of what you do. IT directors are probably all smart people, but at the end of the day, they miss things too. So make sure you have a third party really audit your services and your infrastructure. Best practices, you know, that we just talked about, you know, assess the risk in your network, and especially in the software that you use. If you're a regulated company and you're using software that's proprietary to your business, you know, how does that information get decrypted? And as Ali said before, Sima said before, it really is what the data is that you have. If you have personal identifiable information, you know, you want to look at decryption and encryption within that application. So make sure you're taking a look at that as well. Test the effectiveness of your controls, right? Any company should be really understanding the risk and make sure that you have the compliance services around those risks. So make sure you understand what you really have in place and make sure you test it on a regular basis, because without that, it's just like as good as, you know, putting money into a PC and never updating it again. It needs to be updated. As I said, deploy a multi-layered strategy and work with your management team and your employees on a tabletop so they understand what actually is going on in the environment. Why are you putting the things that you're putting in place so they understand, you know, the liability that actually they're using when they use, they're having when they use these remote desktop implementations or desktop applications. Storage and disposal. You know, how many times have you probably had a hard drive fail on you? And what happens to that hard drive? You know, if you can't get to it, you have to dispose of it properly and make sure that any information on it is deleted or actually destroyed. There's some great trucks that come around and do that shredding every day. You know, work with your IT department to put in strong password, you know, and intrusion detection services to make sure that, again, you're protecting that unauthorized access to your network. Dispose of private information after it's no longer needed in the business, right? You know, again, archiving information, putting it in secure offline storage is really important as well. Don't let it just sit there for years and years, because that's a huge vulnerability. And make sure you have a good disaster recovery and business continuity plan, right? How do you recover your data in the event that any of these things, you know, happen to you? How quickly are you going to get your data back? Is yesterday's data good enough for you? Do you need 4 hours of, you know, data back? Are you good for last week? Think about if you actually went out of business, how far back do you need to go in order to keep the business running? And that's probably a good guide of how your disaster recovery practice should work. Electronic access, you know, there's all different types of ways to regulate it. We always say, you know, in every network, there's an administrator. Make sure you limit the administrators. Don't make the business owner or somebody senior an administrator, because most probably they don't need that type of access. Really limit, you know, who administers your network and has that access. Firewalls are important. Make sure you have them. Make sure you have, you know, a good response, and if in fact confidential materials are taken. if you have really, like Sima was saying, some proprietary information, how do you ensure that your end users are not sending, that information inappropriately to a Hotmail account, a Gmail account? You want to have some data loss protection services within that. There's multiple ways to doing that. There's a lot of software applications that do that, that really you can monitor and have alerted if a social security number is sent out inadvertently through a non-secure means. That's just one example. So you want to take a look at that as well. Mobile device management. Everybody has a mobile device these days. Everybody probably has 2 or 3 devices these days that they work on, and making sure that mobile device is secure. The best way to do it is really to have an MDM application in place that allows you to reach out and destroy the information on that, put it into a container if need be during the work hours. Geofence it so it doesn't go, that data can't be accessed if it's outside a particular region. If it travels overseas and you're not overseas, then that it needs to be destroyed. So things like that can happen. And for every company, they should have a BYOD policy. How do you, bring your own device? Are you allowing people to bring their own devices into the infrastructure and actually access your proprietary data? That's a risk that you need to know and you need to manage. Okay. Every organization, including ours at Lincoln, we have a designated person who's responsible for security. It is a security officer, and obviously that individual works throughout the organization to make sure that people are trained and educated on those risks. They conduct the risk assessments, just like I'm sure your auditors or your financial folks have done, or maybe even your insurance company has done an audit on your infrastructure. Make sure that security is an audit function as well. It's so important these days to have training and awareness for all the employees. Water cooler talk is one thing, but making sure you have a formal training and awareness program that people can say, okay, I get what you're doing, I know what you want, and it's certifiable. You definitely want to have that. Everybody has an IT provider or an IT person. Just again, have auditable functions that go along with that. They're sure smart people, but again, smart people miss things as well, so they need to be audited as well. And make sure you develop an access for the management plan, right? Make sure the management team understands what they need to do, and especially with the written policy procedures, you want to have that in place so that management team knows exactly what they need to do in the event of something that happens on a regular business day or something really happens within the infrastructure. What's the response that happens? For response at your business, and you want to have your management team conduct. And obviously, if people don't comply, again, based on your business culture, what sanctions are appropriate for you. Maybe a discussion, maybe, write up, whatever you think is appropriate, but certainly make sure that people understand security is important and really is important to your organization.
Warranties is a
Yeah, warranties is another good example of how to do that, right? So, work from home policies. We've always talked about work from home policies, and I know Sima hit upon that.
Yeah, I think this is something too. I think as you're, thinking about remote work. So this is another area where many people were this was thrust upon them. It wasn't part of their plan. And you should actually start, or if you haven't done it already, come up with actual policies around it. And part of those things is, like, as Ron mentioned, some of the biggest areas where there's vulnerability, when you look back at how the hackers attack, or where there are leaks. And one of the biggest areas, I think, is the Wi-Fi connection, or how the connectivity is being done. And while in an office setting, when people are bringing in their own devices, now all of a sudden, people are working from home and accessing your company's data or exchanging information that could be considered, personally identifiable, over their own computers, over their own Wi-Fi. So it's important to really think about that on a long-term basis. And it's very important as you're planning to come up with a policy around it, because from a legal standpoint, you know, you don't want to do things in a haphazard way. There should be equity and how, you know, consistency in how you decide to do it. So just some of the things to think about is, you know, the internet access and how that's going to be done? Do you want to, you know, have be that provided by your company, or have that be more controlled? Do you want to have software or some type of, you know, security on, even if it's on someone's personal device, to be able to monitor and make sure that there's not malware installed or things like that? Do you want to, you know, have specific type of, you know, gateway controls? So, you know, what type of, are you using email and different types of systems and how that's being done? But really you kind of have to spell it out for people so that there are specific steps that they take and that there's protocols so that there aren't security breaches. And if there are, you know, even if they're accessing, they're on their own computer, but they're still accessing your network, sometimes malware can come in, you know, on a back way. So it's important to kind of think through all of that when you're thinking about remote work. And we did talk about trade secrets. So, you know, it's easy for me to tell you what a trade secret is just from a legal standpoint, but at the end of the day, really, it's a very specific inquiry based on your organization itself. So it's kind of important to really think about what would be a trade secret for your organization and do a bit of an audit. And as we move more and more to a world where people are really working, whether it's because of a pandemic or just the way that as we're evolving as a society, that everything is more technology based, just in the way that there was somebody who should be really designated to oversee the safety of your organization, you're really going to need someone who's going to be a point person when it comes to technology, who can be, you know, well-versed in what's a trade secret, well-versed in how technology works and in implementing your policies and really understanding how this all relates. So whether that is your HR person or someone who, you know, or your IT person or your vendor, but I think it's important to have somebody who's in charge of all of that. And, you know, for you to understand what a trade secret is and how you can protect that with your technology is not such it's easy to understand it, but it's important to get the right people involved in making those assessments and then developing the policies around it. So some of the things that you can do to protect that information is, you know, how you label or identify things that are confidential or proprietary. So it's like segregating it, having different passwords, having not everybody have access to that information, because then it kind of goes against the theory that it's even proprietary. How the login access is you know, is done or maintained, who has access to those passwords and where those passwords are stored, you know, and even the materials, where are they stored in like, you know, do you have backup copies and where that's done? And then even on the materials themselves, you know, if it's something that's published on the internet, it's going to be really hard to say that that's proprietary. So, you know, the more that it's limited and the access is limited is going to really go to saying that that's information that you wanted to keep secure, and what measures you're using to keep them secure is important.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think one of the bigger things that we always see is administrative privileges that people are granted when they don't, and that really allows people to get to access the data that they don't really need to.
Mm-hmm. So beyond some of the things that you can do to secure, like I said, think about it as, you know, it's, if it was a physical piece of property and you wanted to keep it secure, you would keep it, you know, people have a safe, people have a lock, and you put stuff around it to keep that special thing secure. Those are the kind of things you need to think about from like, you know, electronic ways to secure. From a legal standpoint, there are other things that you can do. So in addition to, you know, a bring your own device policy, there's confidentiality agreements, there's non-compete agreements and non-solicitation agreements. And these are all forms of a restrictive covenant. There's also documents, another agreement is like a technology use agreement. And that means that's agreement that if your company is providing the technology for you to do your job, which could include a laptop, it could include a mobile device, it could include other things, a cell phone, that you're agreeing essentially that you're going to use that for your company's benefit, and the information on those devices remains for the company. So that might be something that is actually more useful going forward, because there's no doubt if you're providing the tech that is yours. But these are other types of agreements you can use to just layer in more protections. And then finally too, it's really important, I think, to think about awareness and training and training your employees. We have put together, you know, for our clients kind of an assessment on even like just, you know, like where are they with cybersecurity? That's something I'm happy to share with Ron and Anne-Marie, just to like think about it and start, you know, like have you even gotten to a point where you're aware of what the issues are and what you need to be doing? But eventually it is important to think about incorporating cybersecurity policies in, I would say, in manager type of training and talent, because it's, you know, it's not just while one person should be responsible, in order for it to be effective, people need to understand and follow along with the practices.
100%, 100%.
So now these plans about like what to do if there is an incident is, you know, this is, I think Ron mentioned like a continuity plan. These are real potential threats. So just in the way that many of us had to all of a sudden deal with a situation where, you know, our businesses were told that they couldn't operate, or we had to do this, a threat of a cybersecurity breach or an issue it's a pretty likely thing. So starting to think about what would happen in the event, it's almost like you kind of need to do that to be just really to be reasonable now, not to be negligent in operating your business. And so to make sure that you don't have, you know, a disaster situation, or that your whole entire thing, you can't function. So what are your contingency plans when it comes to that? And there are ways to map it out. So working with an IT provider, working to make sure that you have figured out what would happen. And a really important component, I think, to cyber, like planning ahead, there are insurance companies now that offer cyber insurance that help you and can help you deal if you have an attack on your system. And they're not, you know, very expensive. I don't have any relationships or anything with a cyber insurance, but it's something like in employment practice, there's something called EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance. It's something I encourage my clients to get, because it just helps, you know, if you're doing all the right things, why not be in a position just in case that you have that? And this is very similar in this phase now to do that. And a lot of the insurance policies, if you do make a claim, will help you get yourself and restore your data and, you know, where you were, assuming you've had plans in place. But also, you know, as I mentioned, there are some legal ramifications for breaches of privacy and, you know, where people do things, and that also helps mitigate against some of those potential claims or losses.
Yeah, with those insurance companies, you know, a lot of companies now are taking over the response. And from a marketing perspective, obviously from a remediation perspective, making sure that, going forward, you have the proper services in place. So, certainly it's a good thing to have in your portfolio for your business.
Yep.
So this is the cybersecurity best practices, and kind of went through some of that already. But again, we want to make sure that everybody understands the risk of lack of security. And so virtual private networking from home, from remote offices when you're on the road is really important. Make sure that you have the proper virtual private network services in, or maybe even a remote desktop, depending on what your business need is. So there's a lot of virtualization products from a desktop perspective that are out there available today, that from a public as well as private network infrastructure can be provided to secure your information, not only in transit, but also at rest. Two-factor authentication. If most people use it already, probably for your banking needs, it's having that another authentication method to actually get in. And if you have a smartphone these days, you're going to get it on your smartphone, and you're going to be able to have that second authentication. A lot of organizations still use tokens, but most of the time it's more prevalent these days to use your smartphone technology to do that. But there are multiple ways to do that. And collaboration with employees. As we're all remote, the biggest risk is how are we communicating. And we're doing this over Zoom today, and everybody has known about Zoom in the past, and all the security issues when they first came out and were using these services. Obviously, they've tightened it up quite a bit over the last 8 months. But at the end of the day, is how do we communicate and make sure that we're sharing information through these particular products like this in a secure manner. If I post a sheet of paper on here or an Excel spreadsheet with numbers, how do you know it's secure? So we need to take a look at that. And really, encryption is the big key, is making sure that everything that you do is encrypted in transit and hopefully at rest as well. So while it's sitting on your computer, how is it done? Tracking who has access to files I went through before, so I'm not going to reiterate that. But are you informing people about the risk of ransomware is another big issue, right? So having them make sure they're aware goes back to what Sima said. That's that training and awareness program that needs to be put in place. And the biggest part of that is email security. Do you have good spam filtering services around your email infrastructure to make sure that you're limiting, scrubbing that email before it comes through, and hopefully catching a predominant amount of that bad spam? I will tell you that there is no spam filter that is 100% foolproof. If somebody's telling you that, please have them give me a call. I have that argument every day. But there are great programs out there to limit the amount of spam that you get. So, everybody should be aware of that. Cybersecurity training we went through already, in mobile device management. Again, one of those key things to have for all those devices that are out there in the wild. So, we went over a bunch of different things today, and from a legal perspective, but also from an IT perspective, and we hope you got something out of this. But a lot of this to us is common sense, right? And making sure that you take common sense measures to protect not only your business, but the data within your business. And also, obviously, as Sima indicated multiple times, the legal ramifications around how to manage your business. So with that, we're going to open it up to any questions that we may have. Go ahead.
Okay, well, sorry. A little bit of a small technical issue there. So if we don't have any questions, if you, I know sometimes people can't come off mute, but if you want to throw anything in the chat, I know we've had a little activity in the chat. So I'll just give it a minute in case there are any questions. I think with that, we'll just wrap up here. So just a couple of closing remarks here from the LincolnIT side and from me personally. It really has been my pleasure to host everybody over these last 3 weeks in these 6 sessions. When we talked about what we wanted to do and what we wanted to deliver to the community, you know, as Ron mentioned, you know, we're a managed service provider, and we work with a lot of clients who rely on us to guide us in some of their technology investments, right, and putting together their technology roadmaps. And so everything that we do has an underlying accent with security integrated into it. It's not a standalone, it's not an aside, it's not an afterthought. It's entrenched in everything that we do. So, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot is having a culture of security, right? And, you know, working with our clients to help them obtain that. So we hope that, you know, in whatever sessions you were able to be, or if this is your first session with us today, that you found something valuable. We will be posting the recordings on our YouTube channel, and we can share the presentation. So if you'd like that, you can reach out to me directly. If you have qualified for our Sip and Secure wine tasting, you will hear from me personally. So I look forward to speaking with some of you one-on-one. And on behalf of LincolnIT, Ali Law Group, and all the other sponsors that we've had for this series, we really appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.